I'm Carrie Finley, a senior research scientist at Montana State University at the Center for Health and Safety Culture. In this video, we are going to discuss the origins of the social environment, how it can transform our approach in traffic safety, and I'll provide an example of this approach. Let's imagine for a moment that you came across a river and you saw dying fish. What would you do? Would you focus on the fish? Would you focus on the water? Many people often say that they would test the water, that they'd go upstream to see if something was getting into the water. Isn't it interesting that we immediately start to focus on the water and we don't immediately focus on the fish? And of course, we know that we need to do both. We can ask ourselves a similar question in traffic safety. In this case, people often want to focus on the driver. But what about the environment? Well, it can be easy to fall into the trap of focusing on individual behaviors like texting while driving or obeying the speed limit laws. We know that addressing traffic safety is challenging. It's complicated. We know that we must focus also on the environment. Our traditional question in traffic safety has been, how do we change driver behaviors? But perhaps we need to shift this thinking and ask a different question. Asking a different question might help us to address the complexities of traffic safety. Instead, what if we asked, how do people learn? If we understand how people learn, we could perhaps leverage how people learn to improve traffic safety. While this question seems broader and more expansive, this question might get us closer to meeting our goals of zero deaths on our nation's roadways. The good news is that this question has been asked and extensively studied. Urie Bronfenbrenner was a researcher at Cornell University in the 1970s, and he explored this very question. Bronfenbrenner studied children. A child learns and is influenced by their parents. And if the child has siblings, they learn from their siblings. As the child ages, they attend daycare or school or preschool, and in these environments, they learn from their teachers and from their peers. These small settings, with a variety of interpersonal interactions, occur where a child learns an enormous amount. As the child grows, these interpersonal relationships expand. The child might be on a sports team or attend an after-school program. They might receive services from their local healthcare provider. These additional settings are generally in the same geographical location, and they share many of the same characteristics. This layer is characterized by relationships with organizations. In a larger community like a city, there are many organizations, many groups or neighborhoods. But all of these will share some characteristics because they're part of the same community. They have the same school system or school board, or they may share the same law enforcement agency. While an individual might not come into direct contact with, for example, their elected officials or law enforcement, they're still impacted and influenced by these community layers. Communities exist in the context of counties and states, which pass laws and allocate resources that influence all of the other layers. These layers form the social environment for learning. Each of these layers of the social environment influences the individual in important ways. And we know that learning and this influence is not just one way, it's bidirectional. For example, while a child learns from their parents, the parent also learns from their child. Similarly, this is true of teachers and peers. And this is true of the outer layers too. Teachers in schools learn from their students, and teachers will influence school policies. Schools and parents will influence local government. The learning is bidirectional. The learning goes both ways. While Bronfenbrenner's thinking is easily illustrated using a child as an example, this same thinking applies to adults too. An adult's interpersonal relationships might include a spouse, a best friend, or a coworker. The organizational layer might include an adult's workplace, their healthcare provider, and their faith community. And an adult's community includes their community's elected officials, state officials, and various other community, regional, and state systems that impact and influence the adult. Here's a graphical representation of a social environment showing the influence on an individual as they learn and develop. We have to remember that there are many aspects to each of these layers. There are many individuals and entities that go well beyond the labels that we've used here. So what are some of the important applications of these layers in our work? First, it's critical that we realize that our work is about much more than just trying to work with individuals. Yes, individuals are absolutely important, but as this quote states, individuals are just the tip of the iceberg. We don't want to ignore the rest of the iceberg. We have to continue to remind ourselves and others that we must move beyond an individual frame. That is the viewpoint that improving traffic safety is only about changing individual behaviors. Now, let's take these examples and ideas and look at a specific traffic safety issue like seatbelts. Let's say that we're working to increase seatbelt use. Many of us would start to focus on the individuals, and we ask the question, how do I get individuals to wear a seatbelt? While this question is important, this question fundamentally focuses on the driver, on the individual frame. It focuses on one small part of the social environment that impacts seatbelt use. Instead, suppose we asked a different question. What if we asked, what actions do I want to grow across the social ecology to increase seatbelt use? This question is fundamentally different than the first question. This question forces us to think about seatbelt use across the social environment, about a range of behaviors, including policies and laws. It forces us to engage with parents, teachers, healthcare providers, and many other agencies that together have a role to influence seatbelt use in our community. And just as we discussed before, each of these layers will influence the other layers. Let me provide you with a specific example of a project in Utah to increase seatbelt use across the social environment. This is an example that moves beyond that individual frame and takes a cultural approach. In this project, we identified behaviors at each of the layers of the social environment that would make a difference on seatbelt use. Each of these behaviors is something that everyone can do, and each of these behaviors has been shown in the research to improve seatbelt use. This project was about growing these behaviors across the social environment, not just focusing on getting individuals to wear a seatbelt. In this way, we can see that the solutions are in the community. Our task is to discover these solutions and then embed them in the social environment. In traffic safety, we must recognize what each layer in the social environment can do and recognize how these layers interact and support each other. The overall approach becomes a cultural approach where improved traffic safety is embedded in the culture and traffic safety becomes who we are and what we do. Thinking through the lens of the social environment transforms our approach to traffic safety. If you came upon a river and you saw dying fish, it would be important to focus on the fish, but it would also be important to focus on the systems to which the fish is a part. One would need to focus on the water, the surrounding land, and the other systems. Similarly, in traffic safety, people are shaped within the context of the systems of relationships that form their social environment. Thus, changes in one layer of the social environment will influence the other layers. To improve traffic safety, we must focus our efforts across the social environment.